There is a moment in every person's life, a quiet moment, usually not the dramatic one you would expect, when something shifts, not loudly, not with trumpets or grand announcements. Just a small, almost invisible turning, like a page in a book you didn't know you were reading. And in that moment, if you are paying attention, you realize that everything you have been chasing, everything you have been told to want, everything the world has been pointing at and calling success, might not be the thing at all. It might just be the decoration on the outside of a house that is completely empty inside. Henry Drummond knew that moment, and he wanted to give it to you. Born in Scotland in 1851, Henry Drummond was not a man who spoke to impress. He was a man who spoke because he genuinely could not stay quiet about something he had found. He was a scientist, a geologist, a naturalist, a professor. He moved in the world of facts and evidence and careful observation. And yet, the thing that consumed him, the thing that he kept coming back to, over and over, across his lectures and his writings and his conversations, was not a formula or a fossil or a theorem. It was love, not the greeting card kind, not the feeling you get when things are going well kind, but love as a force, love as a practice, love as the actual substance of what it means to be fully, completely, gloriously human. His small book, The Greatest Thing in the World, began as a talk, just a talk given to a group of young men one evening, probably in a drafty hall somewhere, with gas lamps flickering and coats still on. Dwight L. Moody, the great evangelist, was in the audience, and according to the story, Moody said afterward that it was the most beautiful thing he had ever heard on the subject of love. He asked Drummond to share it again, and it traveled, first as a manuscript passed hand to hand, copied out by people who needed to hold on to its words a little longer, then as a small printed book. Then, somehow, across more than a century and a half, it arrived here, in this moment, in your ears. That kind of longevity does not happen by accident. A book does not survive 150 years because it was well marketed. It does not outlast empires and wars and technological revolutions because someone had good timing. It survives because it keeps being true. Because each generation of readers opens it and finds to their surprise that it is talking about them. It is talking about the thing they are missing. It is pointing at the empty space in the chest where something important should be and saying, gently but clearly, this is what goes there. So let us walk through it together, slowly, the way it deserves to be walked through. Not rushing past the good parts, not summarizing so quickly that the warmth goes out of it, because this is one of those books that is not just meant to be known. It is meant to be felt. Drummond opens by pointing us to a passage from the New Testament, the 13th chapter of 1 Corinthians, which is sometimes called the love chapter. Paul, writing to a community in ancient Corinth, produces what Drummond calls the analysis of love. And the first thing Drummond does is something that takes a kind of courage. He says, look at what Paul places love above, not below, above speaking in the tongues of men and angels, above the gift of prophecy, above understanding all mysteries and all knowledge, above faith that moves mountains, above giving everything you own to feed the poor, above even offering your body to be burned. And you might sit with that for a moment because it is a remarkable list. These are not small things. These are the things that would get you noticed, the things that would earn you a standing ovation in almost any room, the things that people write monuments about. Eloquent speech, brilliant understanding, sacrificial giving, heroic faith. And Paul, and through him Drummond, looks at all of it and says, without love, it means nothing. Nothing, not less, not a little less impressive, nothing. Drummond is careful here. He is not saying these things are bad. He is not dismissing talent or intelligence or generosity. He is saying something much more specific and much more unsettling. He is saying that all of these things, in the absence of love, are empty. They make noise but carry no weight. They move air but change nothing permanent. A sermon delivered without love is sound. A donation given without love is a transaction. A miracle performed without love is a demonstration. But add love, and suddenly everything transforms. The same words become life. The same gift becomes a bridge between two human hearts. The same act of service becomes something that echoes past the moment it happens. He uses a beautiful phrase. He calls love the sine qua non of virtue, the thing without which nothing else counts. And there is something almost scientific about the way he puts it, which is fitting for a man of science. He is not appealing to sentiment. He is making a case. He is saying, look at the data. Look at the evidence. Look at what happens to lives that are built on achievement without love, and what happens to lives built on love even when achievement is modest. And the results are not close. Think about the people you have admired most in your own life, not necessarily the most famous, not the richest or the most decorated. Think about the person who made you feel in their presence that you were worth something, that you mattered, that the world was a little safer and a little warmer because they were in it. That person was probably not the most impressive person you knew. They may not have had the highest salary or the biggest title or the longest list of accomplishments, but they had something that all the accomplishments in the world cannot manufacture, and you knew it when you were near them, even if you could not name it. That something was love, functioning not as an emotion but as a way of being. And now Drummond does something elegant. He does not just tell you that love is the greatest thing. He takes it apart. He analyzes it the way he would analyze a mineral sample or a biological specimen. He looks at it under the light and identifies its components. Because if love is real, if it is not just a feeling but a practice, then it must have identifiable parts. Things you can work on, things you can develop, things you can choose, one morning at a time, even when you do not feel particularly warm or generous or good. He finds nine ingredients that together make up the full substance of what love actually is when it is alive and working in a human life. The first is patience, which Drummond calls, in the older language of the King James Bible, long-suffering, and he unpacks that word with great care because it is easy to mistake patience for passivity, for simply waiting, for gritting your teeth and enduring. But Drummond means something richer. He means the capacity to absorb difficulty without becoming bitter, to encounter frustration and disappointment and the slow grinding friction of living alongside other imperfect people without contracting inward, without becoming smaller and harder and more defended. He tells us that patience is love encountering the sins and failures of others and choosing again and again not to retaliate, not because you have no power to retaliate, not because you do not feel the sting, but because you understand at some level that retaliation builds nothing, that bitterness is a fire that burns the house it lives in, that the person who carries resentment through their days is carrying a weight that slows everything down, including all the things they actually care about. And here is where a story becomes useful. There was a man, a teacher, who taught in a difficult school in a difficult neighborhood for 30 years. His students were not the easy ones. They came in with hard histories and defended hearts and a very reasonable suspicion that the adults in their lives were not actually on their side. And this teacher, year after year, chose patience. Not because he did not get frustrated, he got frustrated constantly, but because he understood that every time a child pushed back, every time a student was rude or absent or seemingly indifferent, what was actually happening was a test. The child was asking, without using those words, "Are you going to give up on me too?" And his answer, repeated through patience rather than speech, was no. I am not. 30 years, hundreds of students, and when he retired, they came back. Grown men and women, some of them with their own children, came back to thank him. Not for the lessons, not for the subject matter, for the patience, for the way he had refused to stop believing in them even when they were doing everything they could to make that belief inconvenient. That is long-suffering. That is the first ingredient of love, working in an ordinary life, building something permanent. The second ingredient is kindness. And Drummond is sharp on this one because kindness is the active side of love. Patience is love waiting. Kindness is love moving. It is love going out of its way, looking for the opportunity to make something easier, to say the word that lifts, to notice what is needed and to quietly provide it without requiring credit. He points out something that is still, after all this time, one of the most uncomfortable observations in the book. He says that the lack of love in most of us reveals itself not in the dramatic moments but in the small ones, not in whether we would rush into a burning building for a stranger, but in whether we are pleasant to the people we live with on an ordinary Tuesday. Whether the people closest to us, the ones who see us without the performance, experience us as kind. Whether the checkout clerk, the driver in traffic, the colleague who asks the slightly annoying question for the third time, encounters from us something that feels like kindness. Because that is where love is tested, not in the extraordinary, in the ordinary, not in the speeches, in the tone of voice used on a Wednesday evening when you are tired and the conversation is minor and there is nothing at stake except the quality of the moment. Drummond writes that kindness is the language the blind can see and the deaf can hear. And that sentence does something. It reminds you that kindness is not first a word. It is a presence, a quality of attention, a way of orienting toward another person that they can detect even before you speak, even when they are not looking directly at you. Something in the quality of your nearness that says, "You are safe here, you matter to me, I am not going anywhere." The third ingredient is what the old translation calls not envying. Drummond speaks of this one with particular care because envy is one of the subtler poisons. It does not usually announce itself. It arrives dressed as other things. as legitimate criticism, as concern for fairness, as a perfectly reasonable preference for being treated well. But underneath, if you look honestly, it is the slow corrosion of wanting what someone else has, combined with a resentment that they have it. And Drummond points out that envy is fundamentally incompatible with love, because love, real love, actually rejoices in the good fortune of others, not performs joy, not says the right words while internally bristling, actually feels something glad when someone you love succeeds, even if their success is in an area where you yourself have not succeeded, even if their gain does not translate into gain for you, even if, in some narrow accounting, their having more means you having less. That capacity to genuinely celebrate someone else's good is one of the rarest and most beautiful things a human being can do. And it does not come naturally to most of us. It is cultivated, it is practiced, it is chosen over and over in the small moments where envy offers itself as an alternative and love has to be consciously chosen instead. The fourth is what the text calls not being boastful or puffed up. Drummond calls this the absence of ostentatious pride, and he connects it to something deeply practical. Boasting, he says, is the attempt to secure love by displaying merit. It is the strategy of the person who is not sure they are lovable simply as they are, and so works very hard to demonstrate why they deserve to be valued. They talk about their achievements, they name drop, they find ways to steer the conversation toward their victories and their credentials and their recognition. Not because they are bad people, but because somewhere inside they are afraid. Afraid that without the performance, without the resume, without the evidence of worth, they might simply not be enough. And love, Drummond says, frees you from that. Not by telling you that you are impressive, by telling you that impressiveness was never the right currency. That the love worth having does not require a performance. That the people worth being close to are not keeping score of your accomplishments. And that the moment you stop trying to be impressive and start trying to be present, something in every room you walk into changes. People relax, conversations deepen, real things get said. The fifth ingredient is what is sometimes translated as not behaving unseemly. Drummond translates this as courtesy. And he is passionate about it in a way that might surprise you, because courtesy sounds minor, etiquette, manners, the stuff of finishing schools and thank you notes. But Drummond sees it as something else entirely. He sees courtesy as the outward expression of inner respect, as the habit of treating every person you encounter as someone worthy of consideration. He argues that rudeness is never a small thing. It is a symptom. When a person is consistently rude to those they consider beneath them, when they are impatient with service workers and dismissive of people who cannot help them, when the warmth they show in public vanishes the moment they are not being observed, that is not a quirk of personality. It is a revelation of values. It shows you what they actually believe about other people and what they actually believe about love. Love, Drummond insists, cannot coexist with contempt. They cancel each other out. The moment you treat someone as less than human, as an obstacle or a tool or an inconvenience, you have stepped out of love entirely. And stepping back in requires not just a change of behavior, but a change of heart. A genuine reconviction that every person in your field of vision, regardless of what they offer you, regardless of their status or usefulness or beauty or power, is someone who deserves to be treated with dignity. Near around the 10-minute mark of reading or listening to this, you might find yourself doing something interesting. You might find yourself mentally reviewing your own days, replaying moments, checking which of these ingredients you are actually practicing and which ones you have been letting slide. That is not an accident. That is the book doing what it is supposed to do. Not judging you, inviting you to look honestly, because you cannot improve something you are not willing to see clearly. Please like and subscribe to Audiobook Library if this is reaching you and you are finding value in it. It genuinely helps the channel grow, and it means more content like this can keep being made. Your support matters more than you might think. The sixth ingredient is what Drummond calls unselfishness, not seeking her own in the biblical language. And this one is the heart of the whole list, because everything else radiates out from this. The decision, consciously made and repeatedly renewed, to stop organizing your entire inner world around what you get. To genuinely, actually, for real care about the experience of the other person, not as a strategy, not because it will come back to you, but because they are real and what happens to them matters. Drummond acknowledges that this is hard. He does not pretend otherwise. He knows that self is the gravitational center of every human being's experience. That the pull toward your own interests, your own comfort, your own security, your own recognition is constant and powerful. And he is not asking you to pretend that pull does not exist. He is asking you to practice choosing in specific moments to act against it, to let someone else go first, to listen when you would rather speak, To give when keeping would be easier. To ask what someone else needs rather than announcing what you need. And here is the remarkable thing that happens when you practice this consistently. You do not end up with less, you end up with more. Not more of the things you were trying to accumulate, but more of the things that actually satisfy. More genuine connection. More depth in your relationships. More of the sense that your life is actually about something beyond yourself. The person who is always seeking their own, always calculating what they get out of every exchange, ends up progressively more alone, more defended, more surrounded by people who sense correctly that they are being used, while the person who practices genuine unselfishness ends up, mysteriously, richer. In the only currency that actually spends, the seventh ingredient is not easily provoked, or in modern language, not irritable. And this is the one that most of us, if we are honest, need the most work on. Because irritability is such a common and socially accepted failure. We give it passes, we call it being stressed, or being honest, or not suffering fools. We explain it away with a long list of legitimate pressures and provocations. But Drummond strips those explanations away and asks you to look at what is actually happening when you are easily provoked. What is happening, he suggests, is that you are placing your emotional state in the hands of circumstances and other people's behavior, rather than holding it yourself. The easily irritated person is, in a sense, a person who has outsourced their peace. Anything can take it away. A traffic jam, a misunderstood email, a slightly wrong tone of voice from a colleague, the slow cashier, the child who asks one more question. And because anything can take the peace away, the peace is never really there. It is borrowed, conditional, always one small friction away from evaporating. Love, Drummond says, is not like that. Love maintains something underneath the surface turbulence. Not because it does not feel the friction, but because its center of gravity is not located in the friction. It is located somewhere deeper, in a commitment to the person rather than the moment, in a decision that has been made at a level beneath the reactive, which says, I will not let the small things cost the important things. This is not coldness. It is not emotional flatness or suppression. It is the difference between a tree that snaps in the first strong wind and a tree that has roots deep enough to hold. The person who is not easily provoked is not a person who does not feel. They are a person who has practiced, often through pain, finding the root. The eighth ingredient is thinking no evil. Or as Drummond unpacks it, keeping no record of wrongs. And this is perhaps the most liberating ingredient of all, because it addresses something that quietly destroys more relationships than almost anything else. The mental ledger, the running list of grievances, the catalog of every wound, every slight, every broken promise and careless word, kept with perfect accuracy and retrieved with perfect timing whenever a new conflict arises. Drummond points out that love does not keep this ledger, not because it is naive or has a short memory, but because it understands at a cellular level that the ledger serves no purpose except to perpetuate separation. Every time you retrieve an old wound in the middle of a new conflict, you are not solving the new conflict. You are reopening the old one. You are saying, in effect, I have not actually let this go. I was only pretending, and now we are going to relitigate it again, along with everything else. The person who practices love deletes the ledger, not once. Repeatedly, every time it starts to rebuild, they make a conscious choice not to collect evidence against the people they care about, not to wait for the moment to deploy the perfect devastating reminder of a past failure, not to keep score in a game where everyone loses the longer it goes on. This does not mean accepting abuse. It does not mean pretending that harmful behavior is fine. Love, real love, is also honest. Drummond will say more about this. But there is a difference between honestly addressing a pattern of behavior that is causing harm and keeping a mental arsenal of past offenses ready to be weaponized. One is love in action. The other is the opposite of love wearing love's clothing. The ninth ingredient is what the text calls bearing all things, believing all things, hoping all things, enduring all things. Drummond takes each of these in turn, but what runs beneath all four is a single quality, which is resilience. Love's refusal to be finished, its capacity to absorb the worst and still not give up. To believe in the person even when the evidence against them is accumulating. To hope for the relationship even when hope seems unreasonable. To endure difficulty without exiting. And he is careful again here. He is not recommending a kind of spineless optimism that refuses to see reality. He is not saying stay in a situation that is destroying you because love endures. He is saying something more specific. He is saying that love's default posture is toward the person rather than away from them. That love's first instinct is to look for what is still redeemable, what is still worth working for, what is still alive between two people, rather than scanning for exit ramps. He quotes the passage directly. Love bears all things, and the word bear means to cover, to protect, to roof over. Love puts a roof over the failures of the people it loves. It does not broadcast them. It does not use them to build a case. It covers them the way you would cover someone shivering in the cold, not to pretend the cold is not real, but to protect the person from its worst effects. Love believes all things, not in the sense of being gullible, but in the sense of extending the benefit of the doubt, of choosing when two interpretations are possible, to hold the more generous one until it is clearly disproven. Love hopes all things, which means love is not bound by the present condition. It sees what is not yet, what could be, what the person in front of you might become if given enough time and patience and belief. And it acts toward that future person, even when the present one is making it very difficult. Love endures all things, and here Drummond's language becomes almost geological. He is talking about a quality that does not wear out, that is not subject to emotional weather, that is present in the hot seasons and the cold ones, in the easy years and the brutal years, in the moments of great joy and the long stretches of ordinary difficulty. Love endures, he says, not because it is not affected by the difficulty, but because it has made a decision that outlasts the difficulty. And then, at this point in the book, Drummond does something unexpected. He steps back from the analysis. He has laid out the ingredients. He has shown you what love looks like when it is working. And now he asks, quietly but unmistakably, where does this leave most of us? Because most of us, if we are measuring ourselves against this standard, are not scoring well. Most of us are patient sometimes and irritable plenty, kind in public and less careful at home. Not boastful in the obvious ways, but quietly keeping track of what we are owed, hoping all things in our best moments and catastrophizing in our worst. And the gap between this standard and our daily lived reality is significant enough to be uncomfortable. But Drummond does not leave you in the discomfort. He moves quickly to something important. He says, this is not a standard designed to make you feel guilty. It is a standard designed to show you what you are aiming for. And the difference matters. Guilt is a weight. A target is a direction. He also says something else that is crucial. He says you cannot manufacture love by trying harder. The project of self-improvement, the grinding effort of forcing yourself to be more patient and more kind and less envious through sheer willpower, is a project that has a ceiling. You hit the ceiling fairly quickly. You cannot be good enough by trying to be good enough. That is not how this works. What changes you, Drummond argues, is contact with love itself. It is being near it, studying it, filling your attention with it, letting it do what only it can do, which is to reshape the person from the inside out rather than from the outside in. He believed, with the conviction of someone who had seen it happen in real lives, that a person who genuinely contemplates love, who sits with it and examines it and lets it get into the roots of their thinking, will gradually and organically become more loving. Not because they forced it, because they were changed by it. And this is where the book becomes not just a piece of moral instruction, but something closer to a kind of spiritual technology. Drummond is describing a practice, not a feeling, not a belief you hold, a practice, something you do day after day in the small and unremarkable fabric of your actual life. You choose patience in the moment when irritation is available. You reach for kindness when dismissal would be easier. You delete the ledger when you feel the urge to retrieve it. You extend the benefit of the doubt when suspicion is crouching at the door. And each time you make that choice, something strengthens. Not by force, by exercise. He compares it to the development of a muscle. You do not go to the gym once and become strong. You go consistently, over time, and the strength builds gradually, almost imperceptibly, until one day you notice that something you once struggled with is now simply who you are. Love is like that. You choose it in specific moments. You fail sometimes, and choose it again. And slowly, over years, the choosing becomes less effortful and the love becomes more natural. Not automatic, never automatic, but more available. There is a story about a woman who decided, in her 50s, to practice exactly this. She had spent most of her adult life carrying grievances. She was not a cruel person, she was not even a particularly difficult person, but she had a habit, built over decades, of keeping mental notes on every way she had been wronged. By her siblings, by her ex-husband, by colleagues who had taken credit for her work, by friends who had not shown up when she needed them. She carried all of it, efficiently organized, always accessible. Then she read a book, a small book, and something in it reached her. Not the theology, not the religion, the practicality of it, the ingredient list, the description of what keeping the ledger actually does to a person. And she made a decision, not dramatic, not announced to anyone, just a private interior decision, to begin deleting it. One entry at a time. She started with the smallest grievances. The ones she barely cared about anymore anyway. She let those go first, the way you start cleaning a room from the corner where the mess is lightest. and as those cleared, she felt something she had not expected. Space, a kind of interior spaciousness, as if the room of her mind had suddenly more room in it, room for things other than the catalog of injuries. She worked inward toward the bigger ones, the harder ones, the ones she had built parts of her identity around, and those were not easy. Some of them took years. Some of them she worked on and then had to work on again when they crept back. But she kept choosing, and something changed, not just in her inner life, though it changed there dramatically, in the actual texture of her relationships. People began responding to her differently. Her children called more often. Her friendships deepened. She found herself in her 60s, building the kind of life she had wanted in her 30s but had been too defended to allow. Love had done that. Not love as a feeling, love as a practice, chosen, maintained, cultivated over time. Drummond then turns to a question that might be forming in the back of your mind. If love is the greatest thing, if it is the supreme good, the essential ingredient without which everything else is hollow, then what about the other goods? What about faith? What about hope? These are not minor things. These are the great virtues, celebrated across every tradition, held up as the highest of human excellences. And here Drummond is tender and careful. He does not dismiss faith or hope. He says that faith and hope are glorious. They are among the most beautiful things a human being can carry. But they are, he suggests, appropriate to this world, to this stage of existence. Here in this life where so much is uncertain and so much is hoped for and not yet seen, faith is essential. Where so much of what we long for has not yet arrived, hope is the thing that keeps us moving. But in a world where all uncertainty is resolved and all hope fulfilled, neither faith nor hope is needed in the same way. They complete themselves and are transcended. Love is different. Love does not complete itself and disappear. Love is not a means to an end. Love is the end. It is the thing itself. And Drummond, in a moment of breathtaking simplicity, says, wherever there is love, you are touching the eternal. Because love, in its truest form, has no natural terminus. It does not run out of purpose. It does not become obsolete. It is not a scaffolding that comes down when the building is complete. It is the building. This is one of the most quietly revolutionary claims in the entire book, because it repositions everything. If love is the end rather than a means, then the goal of a human life is not achievement or accumulation or even virtue in the conventional sense. The goal is love. The question you are answering with your actual choices, with the way you spend your mornings and your attention and your emotional energy, is this: how much love am I generating? How much love is flowing through me and out of me into the lives of the people around me? And by that measure, the most successful life is not the most impressive one. It is the most loving one. The life of the person who may never be famous, may never accumulate great wealth, may never stand in front of a large crowd and receive their approval, but who has been consistently, faithfully, patiently, generously loving, who has made the people in their immediate world better for having them in it, who has been a place of safety and encouragement and genuine care, who has, in the beautiful phrase Drummond uses, scattered along their path, in all directions, the seeds of kindness and encouragement and hope. That person, Drummond says, has lived well. Whatever else they did or did not accomplish, they have done the thing. They have participated in what matters most. They have been present to the deepest reality available to human beings. And now Drummond moves to what is perhaps the most searching part of the book. He asks you to take an honest inventory, not in a harsh or shaming way, in the way a good doctor asks you to describe your symptoms, not to condemn you but to understand what is actually happening. He asks, what is the standard of your daily life? When you wake in the morning and begin your day, what is the thing that actually organizes your energy and attention? What are you actually oriented toward? For most people, honestly, the answer is something in the neighborhood of my own comfort and security and success. Not stated that baldly, wrapped in perfectly good justifications, the need to support the family, the responsibility to fulfill obligations, the legitimate desire to build something meaningful. All true, all real. But underneath, in the unconscious organization of daily choices, much of what drives us is the seeking of what is ours. Drummond is not condemning this. He is diagnosing it, and his prescription is not guilt. It is not a program of heroic self-denial. It is something more like a reorientation, a gradual, daily practice of turning the compass slightly, consistently, in the direction of love. Not dramatic, not all at once, just a small turn each day. In the morning, before the day begins, one small choice to prioritize someone else. In the middle of the day, one moment to genuinely notice the person in front of you rather than looking through them at the next thing on your list. In the evening, one reflection not on what you achieved, but on who you were to the people around you. Compounded over time, these small turns add up to a completely different direction of travel. a completely different destination. He speaks with particular tenderness about the missed opportunities, the moments where love was available and was not chosen, where someone needed a kind word and received a distracted nod, where a child needed presence and received a parent who was physically there but mentally elsewhere, where a friend reached out and received a perfectly polite but essentially absent response. He is not piling on guilt, he is naming something real, because the missed opportunities are not just neutral. They are small deaths, small withdrawals of life from the world, and they accumulate on both ends. The person who needed the love carries the absence. The person who did not offer it carries, perhaps without knowing it, a vague deficit, a sense of something undone. Love, chosen in the moment it is available, does not just help the recipient, it also helps you. There is a quality of aliveness that comes from being actively loving, from paying attention, from choosing generosity, from being present to someone else's reality in a way that is genuine rather than performative. It is hard to explain to someone who has not felt it, but there is a fullness in the act of loving that is quite different from the emptiness that follows transactions. When you give genuinely, when you listen truly, when you show up completely for someone who needed you, something in you also fills. Something that was hungry gets fed, not because you deserve a reward, but because love is the kind of thing where the giving and the receiving are not oppositely positioned. They are intertwined. There is a man, a hospice worker, who spent 15 years sitting with people in the last weeks and days of their lives. He heard more final conversations than most people hear in a lifetime. And he was asked once, what do people talk about at the end? What comes up most? He said the answers were not what you might expect. People did not in the main wish they had worked more. They did not wish they had been more successful or more recognized or more financially secure. They did not reach for their resumes. What they reached for was people. They talked about the people they loved and the times they had failed to say so, the conversations they had been meaning to have and kept putting off, the moments of grace they had been offered and had not quite received, the kindnesses they had shown and been shown, the texture of ordinary love, the Sunday mornings and the shared meals and the long evenings of nothing in particular, which had felt at the time like background and which they now understood had been the foreground all along. Henry Drummond would not have been surprised by any of that. It is exactly what his book says in nearly those words across more than a century of time. At the end, love is what matters. And at the end, you know it. The question is simply whether you know it earlier, whether you can bring the clarity of the ending into the middle of the story, whether you can let that knowledge reshape the daily choices before the final accounting. He believes you can. He writes with the conviction of someone who is not offering a theory but a testimony. He has seen love working. He has watched it transform people and relationships and communities. He has seen the before and the after. And he is asking you, simply, to take it seriously. To stop treating it as a nice add-on to the more important business of your life. To recognize that it is not a supplement. It is the main thing. It was always the main thing. And when he talks about where love comes from, about what makes a person capable of sustained, generous, resilient love, he does not let it rest on personal virtue or natural temperament. He says that love in this form, love as a full-spectrum practice rather than a feeling that comes and goes, is not something you generate from inside yourself. It is something that flows through you from a source that is larger than you. He believed, with the whole of his being, that the source was God, not a concept, not a metaphor, but an actual reality. The love that Drummond describes is not human in origin. It is participated in, rather than manufactured. You open to it. You allow it. You practice the posture that lets it move through you. And even if your framework is different from Drummond's, even if you do not share his theology, the insight is still available. Because what he is pointing at is the experience of being larger than yourself, of acting from a place that is not defined by your own immediate interests or moods or history, of finding, in specific moments of genuine love, that you have somehow exceeded what you thought you were capable of, that something happened through you that surprised even you. That experience of exceeding yourself in love is, Drummond would say, the most reliable indication of what you are built for. It is the moment when you are most fully yourself, not because you rose above your humanity, but because you went deeper into it, to the place where your humanity and something larger meet. He closes the book with a meditation on love's permanence, on the fact that of all the things that exist in this world, love is the one that carries the most convincing case for lasting beyond it. Knowledge is partial and will be completed. Prophecy is preparatory and will be fulfilled. Faith is appropriate to uncertainty and will be resolved. But love has no resolution because it is not a problem. It is a reality. And realities do not dissolve. They continue. He quotes again, love never fails. 2 words. Almost embarrassingly simple, Love never fails. But sit with what that means. Not that love always gets the result it wanted. Not that love always receives love in return. Not that love prevents loss or pain or the crushing grief of watching someone you love suffer. It means something more like love never becomes pointless. It never turns out to have been a waste. It never deposits you, at the end, with less than you would have had without it. Every investment of genuine love is permanently woven into the fabric of what has existed. It cannot be taken back. It cannot be erased. It is there in the person it touched, in the world it shaped, in you who chose it. It is there forever. This is not a small claim. It is one of the largest claims that can be made, and Drummond makes it with the quietest possible confidence. Not shouting, not performing, just stating what he has come to know. Love never fails. And in the space that opens after that sentence, he invites you, one more time, to consider your own life. Not with the pressure of perfection, with the gentleness of possibility. You are here, you are alive, you have ahead of you some amount of time, hours or years, you do not know exactly how many, but some amount. And in that time you will have opportunities to love or not to love, to practice patience or to choose irritation, to offer kindness or to withhold it, to delete the ledger or to maintain it, to believe the best or to assume the worst, to stay or to exit, to give or to keep. Every one of those moments is an opportunity. Not to perform love, to practice it, to become slowly and through repetition the kind of person through whom love moves naturally, not perfectly, not without failure, but consistently, genuinely, in the direction of the greatest thing. Because at the end of everything, when the noise settles and the score is calculated by the only measure that actually counts, it will not be asked of you how much you accumulated, or how much you achieved, or how many people recognized your name. It will be something simpler, something Drummond believed could be said of anyone, regardless of their circumstances or gifts or opportunities. It will be asked, did you love? And the beautiful, almost unbearable thing about that question is that it is available to every single person who has ever lived. It does not require a particular talent or a particular level of education or a particular amount of money or a particular kind of personality. It requires only a daily choice, a small turn of the compass, again and again and again. That is what the greatest thing in the world is saying. That is what Henry Drummond, with his Scottish voice and his scientist's mind and his enormous tender heart, spent his life trying to give to anyone who would listen. Not a complicated doctrine, not an impossible standard, a practice, a direction, a way of being that is open to anyone in any life at any moment, including this one, including yours. And if you have been listening to this, if these words have done something in you, if somewhere in the middle of this you found yourself thinking about a specific person you have been treating with less than the love they deserve, or a specific habit of mind you want to change, or a specific moment you want to do differently, then the book has worked. Drummond has reached across a century and a half and touched something real in you, and that is not a coincidence. That is love doing what love does, traveling through time, crossing every possible barrier, finding exactly the person who needed it. Please like and subscribe to Audiobook Library if this has been valuable to you. It truly does help the channel grow and allows more content like this to be created, more of these old and beautiful books brought into audio form where they can reach people who might never have found them otherwise. Every single subscription and like makes a real difference, and it is genuinely appreciated. There is one final thing worth saying before we close. Drummond ends his book not with a command but with an invitation. He is not standing over you, pointing. He is standing beside you, gesturing towards something he finds beautiful and asking if you see it too. He is the kind of person who has found something worth sharing and cannot help but share it. Not to impress you with his discovery, to give it to you, to say, here, take this. This is the most important thing I know. I do not want to keep it to myself. And that posture itself is love in action. The book is not just about love. It is an act of love, written by a man who believed that one person telling another person the truth, gently and clearly and with genuine care for what they do with it, is one of the most important things that happens in the world. So the invitation is simply this. Take what you have received here, not as a pleasant experience to be filed away under things I've learned. Take it into tomorrow. Into the first difficult moment of tomorrow, where patience will be available if you choose it. Into the first conversation where kindness is possible if you reach for it. Into the first small choice to delete the ledger instead of adding to it. Into the first moment where love is available, as it always is, as it always will be, waiting for you to choose it. The greatest thing in the world is love. It always was. It always will be. And it is available to you right now. in exactly the life you are already living, with exactly the people who are already in it. Choose it. That is all. Thank you for listening to this complete summary of The Greatest Thing in the World by Henry Drummond. If this resonated with you, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to Audiobook Library. It costs you nothing, and it means everything to the channel. We are building a library of exactly these kinds of books, the ones that have lasted because they deserve to last, the ones that say something true about what it means to be human. And every subscriber is a part of making that library possible. Please also check out our other videos on the channel. There is a growing collection of summaries and readings from books just like this one, books that can quietly change the direction of a life if you let them. We would love for you to explore what is there and find something that speaks to exactly where you are. Thank you, genuinely, for being here.